WRLC, and I want to welcome you to our remote tech talk, Researching Behind and Beyond the Paywall with Trevor Watkins. In today's tech talk, Mr. Watkins will examine open access repositories, OCLC, the Ohio College Library Center, and discuss a plethora of search engines, databases, and some tools and strategies to use when conducting research. This tech talk is presented by George Mason University and the Northeastern Ohio Association for Computing Machinery. NEOACM is a professional chapter of the International ACM, the world's largest educational and scientific computing society that advances computing as a science and as a profession. NEOACM is based in Youngstown, Ohio, and for the last 10 years of our existence, we meet regularly to discuss diverse topics and function as an intellectual and geographical node of activity for both ACM members, the computing community, and the general public by offering seminars, lectures, forums, and the opportunity to meet peers and experts from many disciplines. Our Series 101 Remote Tech Talks are an introductory treatment of topics for computing students and professionals. Mr. Watkins' presentation will be 45 minutes. So if you're interested in posing questions, post your question in the chat anytime during the presentation or Q&A. Tracy Hughes, our co-chair, will be our moderator. She'll take the questions from the chat to post to Trevor. We'll also have a very short 5-question survey we'd like everyone to take before they exit the meeting at the conclusion. Our presenter today is Trevor Watkins. He is the Teaching and Outreach Librarian at George Mason University. He works with faculty, students, and researchers on projects, grants, and scholarships while teaching information literacy courses and conducting library carpentry workshops for Digital Scholarship Center at GMU. Mr. Watkins is the technical lead and chair of the web committee of Project STAND and is a member of the technical advisory group for the National Finding Aid Network, which is a collaboration between OCLC, the Ohio College Library Center, the California Digital Library, Shift Collective, the University of Virginia, and the Chain Bridge Group. His research interests include AI literacy, human-AI collaboration, STEM librarianship, information literacy integration models, open knowledge diffusion tools, and teaching and learning theories in non-traditional spaces. Mr. Watkins has co-authored, published papers and presentations at conferences and is a 2021 IMLS Fellow for the IDEA Institute on Artificial Intelligence. Some of his current projects are Black Squirrel GNU/Linux operating system, Cosmology of Artificial Intelligence, and MoCA, Mason Library's Orientation Conversational Agent. Trevor is a professional member of both IEEE and ACM. He's also the founder of Gray Alien Technologies, where he consults with public libraries, academic libraries, and Black and Indigenous people of color organizations about their technology needs. Mr. Watkins holds an MS in Information Architecture and Knowledge Management and an MS in Library Information Science from Kent State University. He also holds an MS in Computing and Information Systems for Youngstown State University. So at this point, I want to present Trevor Watkins. Trevor?
Thank you, James. And thank you all for attending today. I'm pretty sure you could have all went to, I think the Academy Awards is on tonight, so you probably, could have had some popcorn and went to watch that. So I appreciate your time tonight, stopping through to hear this presentation. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about researching behind and beyond the paywall. A lot of times I give this talk or version of this talk from outgoing students that are getting ready to leave George Mason University. As you all know, once you are no longer a student, you no longer have some of the access that you had while you were a student. So that's access to some of the databases and electronic books, a lot of resources that particular university, in this particular case, George Mason University, that we subscribe to, that you have access to as a student throughout your time there. So this is built for students after that, and also if you are someone in the community and you want to do high-level research, you can do so. Sure, there are some limitations by the paywall, but there are also some ways that you can circumvent it. And I'm going to talk a little bit about those things, as well as some databases that you can search and some repositories or archives that you can look at as well, that's accessible to the public. So the learning objectives for this particular talk, when you leave this talk, you should be able to identify 3 types of paywalls and ways to legally and illegally, although I'm not recommending you do that. However, it's my job as a librarian to give you all the alternatives. Now, if you go and do something that you're not supposed to do, and like I said, I'm going to say this is illegal, and you get caught, that's on you, it's not on me. But there are ways that you can circumvent some of these paywalls. A lot of students that I speak to, I discussed this with them during their orientation session, obviously the legal ones. But some students have actually used the illegal methods already. And that's actually how I found out about what are called pirate libraries, what I'll talk about in a moment. Also, identify types of consortia and define their importance. For those of you who don't know, just about every state, and actually this is global, this happens globally. You have consortia where a lot of institutions, be it academic, information science related, and educational organizations where they sort of share resources. And this is a way to sort of circumvent the financial impact from a negative standpoint, trying to get these resources. A lot of times, universities can't do it, public libraries can't do it. And so what they do is sort of join forces and they share those costs. So I'm going to talk about that. And then I'm going to then you'll be able to identify alternative search engines to Google. Most people use Google to do their searches. And that also includes people in academia, which is one of the reasons why my job is important as a librarian, is to point to alternatives to that and why those search engines or databases are more important, why you get the pertinent information that you're looking for. So I'm going to talk about those as well. So number one, what are paywalls? So paywalls are basically limitations or denial of access to content for which you are not subscribed. So if you've ever been on your phone, your mobile phone, or just searching on your laptop, and let's say you go to Yahoo and you have all those news headlines. Or if you go to CNN and you click on the article and that goes directly to New York Times. In some cases, you'll see part of that article. And in some case, and then after that, you start reading it, and then it'll say more. And as you try to click on more, it then asks you to log in, right? In some cases, you might go to a website, or you might be redirected to a website where the access is completely blocked. So here are 3 types of paywalls. The first is a soft paywall. This allows access to some content, but blocks some content of the page, but there are workarounds. So just like I said, in some, especially in some news media sites, those are usually soft paywalls. Apple has one now where they also have their team that puts together news articles, and they give you some ability to read a portion of that. And then after that, you have to subscribe for $9.99 or for whatever cost that is. So there are actual workarounds, and these are legal workarounds. You can use a couple of browser extensions. So for Firefox, you have what's called bypass paywalls. And then for Chrome, you have unpaywall. All right, so with bypass paywall, what it does is it actually looks in the index, there's like 20 million articles, and it'll try to find a copy of the freely available PDF text, full text. And if that is actually available, then you are represented, or you're, in some cases, you're pointed to that actual free copy, or that free copy is made available. And on unpaywall, it's kind of similar in that same respect. So in some cases, when you go to, let's say you go to Apple or New York Times, and you try to access a particular article, and the article immediately says, it goes up, and then when you click more, you have that pop up. In some cases, you might click on it and that pop up might immediately come up. So the extension actually stops it from doing that, and it'll find that free article for you. You also have, so some other examples are a lot of trade publications. So a trade publication, for those of you that may not know what that is, that's usually a periodical, such as a magazine that's specific for a certain audience. So for example, if you read Wired magazine, if you're into IT stuff, or Financial Times, or if you're reading the news, Baltimore Sun, and a lot of local newspapers have those soft paywalls that you can actually bypass. Hard paywalls, it's basically no free content, like I said before. You either subscribe, you pay immediately, or you leave. And so there is a workaround for that. And the workaround for that is actually illegal, and that's called pirate libraries. And I'll talk about that in a moment. So usually, if you think, for those of you who've ever searched for articles and you've run against Elsevier is regarded in the academic industry, in the academic sphere, as the evil empire. They have, there's a lot of journal articles where you can't access that information at all. However, because of pirate libraries, they have actually opened up some of their content. And you have green open access, and you also have gold open access. So the differences between those two, with green, is you can, as an author, you can actually publish your article with that particular journal. So let's say Elsevier owns that journal. You can publish within that article, and it's open access. It's available for everybody. However, you can't actually use that in another, let's say, another repository. But with green, you can actually do that. Okay, so like ResearchGate, which is another, if you're doing research, you sign up with ResearchGate. Let's say you're looking at some of the researchers there, and let's say there's a researcher, or there's a professor that you like. You've read some of their articles before, but there's a certain article where it's behind the paywall. You can contact them, and they'll give you access to it. So that's an example. But I'll talk about pirate libraries in the next slide. And then you have what are called metered paywalls. So this allows a set number of articles. However, after that set number of articles, you'll then be locked out. So it's sort of like, giving you a taste of what's there. And then, of course, you have to pay. Packed is actually one. So if you're looking at technology books, let's say you're interested in learning Python or Ruby or JavaScript or anything like that, you can actually read some of the ebooks for free. And then after a couple of those ebooks that you read, you have to then pay an amount. So those are metered paywalls. Those can actually be bypassed if you use a browser in private mode. So a lot of people don't know that. So that's all about the cookies. So if you're actually searching in private mode, or if you use if you use a particular search engine, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, you can actually look at as many articles or many ebooks as you need. It doesn't work all the time, but it works a lot of the time. And as over here, as you can see, bypass paywall is one. There's quite a few of them. Bypass bypass and unpaywall are probably the best. And again, unpaywall is for Chrome and bypass is for Firefox. You can, if you use other browsers like Opera, and if you use some Linux browsers like LibreWolf, I believe bypass is actually, that extension is available there as well. You just have to check. So pirate libraries. So I'm not going to go, but I am giving you guys the URLs for these sites. So to give you a little bit of background, a little context for Library Genesis, there's over 50,000, I believe, books that are academic books that are actually available through Library Genesis, and more academic libraries are actually added to this. So a lot of students, when they are getting they're using their core classes, they'll actually come to Library Genesis to see if their book is actually there. So this is actually illegal, but obviously because of copyright. But this is a way that if you were looking for academic books and other sort of materials, you can access that from Library Genesis. Sci-Hub is the big one. So when I talked about Elsevier, when I was a STEM librarian at Kent State University, we always had an issue with cost. So in some cases, like the Royal Society of Chemistry, there's like a host of chemistry journals that the chemistry department had access to. But when we negotiate the contract, in some cases, it got so expensive that we couldn't keep all of the journals. And in some cases, OhioLink would negotiate on behalf of the universities, and I'll talk about OhioLink a little bit later. But ultimately, Sci-Hub has about 88 million articles. Most of it is scientific. So artificial intelligence, physical sciences. So a lot of students actually use Sci-Hub. But it is illegal. The United States and other countries have tried to actually sue Sci-Hub. However, Sci-Hub, their servers obviously are not under the 14 Eyes. And for those of you that know what the 14 Eyes, for those of you who don't know what 14 Eyes is that's an agreement between those 14 nations to sort of share information. And so some of those servers are in the Netherlands, some of those servers are actually in Russia. And actually the person who built Sci-Hub was a Russian female software engineer. And so this is all predicated on open science, and that knowledge should be 100% accessible, and it should not be behind paywalls. So there's a process, a very simple process that you can go in if you're actually putting an article in, or if you're actually trying to access an article. And I have tried this for research purposes because I was doing an article on it, and 99% of the time it worked. There is over 500,000 articles a day that's being inputted into this database. So any kind of article that you can think of where you can't access it because it's behind a university paywall, if you're not, obviously if you're not a student, or if you're a student of the university, and obviously the universities can't, or they do not have access to every single journal or ebook, So you are then able to go to those, directly to those journals, and if it's locked, you can take the DOI, you can plug that in, and it'll strip any of that content and DRM content, and you'll be able to get access to that. But again, that is illegal. But those are two of the primary ways that a lot of people in the international community do their research, especially countries that don't have the funding. So this was a godsend to them, because now they can search and use resources that wouldn't otherwise be available to them. So this is one of the reasons why, because they failed, Elsevier and some of these other journals, or you can call them sort of a consortium of researcher. This is one reason why they've started to open up access to some of their content, but obviously not all of their content. Okay, the Internet Archive. So a lot of people know the Wayback Machine or the Internet Archive as a place to search, go back in history and look at snapshots of websites. But over the years, it's become a lot more than that. I've used this quite often. In a lot of cases, when I do literacy instruction with students, there's a lot of material that's in the Internet Archive. So you're talking about over 666 billion web pages on the internet. And so you're talking about government. So if you want to look at NASA images, there's an actual archive of NASA images that goes way back. There's also, if you want to look at some of the military stuff that's not actually accessible, or I won't say not necessarily accessible, but some of the stuff from a historical standpoint that's not readily accessible is here. So you have the Defense Technical Information Archive, and this is the research and engineering arm for the Department of Defense. So there's an archive, there's a lot of information here. Also, they have journals, journals of all types, social sciences, physical sciences, and also FedLink. This is NIH, USDA, and our NIST. So if you want to see any, what's going on with COVID, stuff that's actually not accessible, some stuff is actually in its archive, but this is the place you'd have to go to get it. This is freely available. So as I said, this, it's videos, microfilm, journal article, obviously all those things are digitized, photos, music, you name it, it's actually here. Patents, so it's all of this stuff. This is a very popular archive or resource or repository to find information if you're a researcher, whether you're inside of an institution or if you're someone in the community and you're doing, if you're doing hardcore research, or if you're just doing research and you're just trying to satiate your curiosity. Okay, next is the World Catalog. So the World Catalog is the world's largest catalog. It houses a collection from more than 10,000 libraries internationally. So we're talking about print books, electronic books, downloadable articles, theses and dissertations, microfiche. So if you think about theses and dissertations, I did a thesis at Youngstown State University. And so I would go straight to Youngstown State University to see my thesis. If you wanted to see, let's say you graduated from Kent State and you want to go see your thesis or dissertation, you can go directly to Kent State. But in WorldCat, you can now just go right here and it's all centralized. And you have access to everything all over the country and actually all over the world. And you can see theses and dissertations on a particular topic. electronic books, print books. I actually was doing research a couple of years ago where I got a book from the UK. It took about 2 weeks for it to get, it was a physical book. It took about 2 weeks for it to get from the UK to the US, and I had 30 days to use that book. So there are loan rules if it's coming from an international resource, if it's a physical book or it's a physical article and you have to return it. But most of those articles are downloadable. Those have been digitized. So if it is actually available, you'll get access. You can actually download that article. One of the other really cool features that I like in WorldCat, and this also speaks to everyone here, if you don't have a library card at your local library, you should get one. One of the cool features about WorldCat is you can search for a particular item, and if that book, let's say you're searching for a book, and you find that book, it'll actually show you, if it's a physical book, it'll show you what libraries actually hold it within your zip code area. So for example, if I did a search here, and I just got a Yorkie, was it last year? And let's say I wanted to do, I found a book and on trying to take care of Yorkies. I have that book. It'll show me if it's at the Cleveland Public Library or Cuyahoga County Library or Cleveland Heights Library. And also, you can expand that search like 100 miles, 200 miles. So that would also go into Youngstown Public Library System, or Youngstown State. So it also includes academic institutions as well. So that's just one of many features that WorldCat actually has. So if you're doing any kind of research, it's a really, really good resource to use. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the directory of open access journals and the directory of open access books. So the directory of open access journals, this started or launched in 2003. It is actually being curated by a lot of entities. Those are actually, some of those are public libraries, academic libraries, academic institutions, specialized libraries. And so there's over 130 countries that are represented, not just on the board or participating in the curation of this, but also that contributes in terms of journal editing, contributing articles. So there's over 12,000 journals without author processing charges. So if you are looking to actually write an article, if you're a researcher and you're looking to write an article, they've identified there's 12,000 journals that are here where you're not charged a fee. Typically for open access journals, you are charged a processing fee if you're trying to publish. But there are 12,000 that are journals without APCs. There are 17,551 journals overall with 7.3 million material. And that includes articles, electronic books, videos, you name it, of scholarly, and definitely scholarly articles. So I obviously found out about this, when I first became an academic librarian back in 2014. But I learned about Bill's list. So for those of you that may not know, and this kind of speaks to the open access problem in some cases, is you have a lot of predatory journals. So predatory journals, what they do is if you're a junior faculty, because they usually try to prey on junior faculty because you're going through the tenure process, you'll get an email, or junior faculty will get an email and they'll say, hey, whatever research you have, consider publishing with us. And usually they'll tell you, you'll get a fast peer review process. That'll happen within 7 days, and they churn out articles like once a week. So there's a very fast response. And so what has happened is, what have happened in the past is you've had people who've published papers where, and they've actually, they're actually worked at reputable universities, found out a lot of their stuff was, they had a lot of plagiarism because they don't check for those things, and some of those people were fired. So Jeffrey Bill, what he did in response to that is he actually created a list of predatory journals. And so he called out all of those journals. A lot of those journals tried to sue. I think Omicron was one of, not the COVID-19 variant, but that was actually one of the, I think one of the journals that tried to sue. They tried to hit him with $1 billion lawsuit. So to make a long story short, he actually ended up having to take that list down. But while it was up for a couple of years. And so what people used to do, especially junior faculty, is they would actually cross-reference Bill's list with the director of open access journals. So if there was anything in the DOAJ, because that was also another thing, and initially they didn't have a system that was set up that was sort of accurate to check for those things. And so Jeffrey Bill sort of brought that in, and now that's sort of integrated into that process when they're actually reviewing journals to see if they're valid or not. But that's the director of open access journals. You also have the director of open access book. Again, that's 50,532 academic peer-reviewed books. And both of these are community curated, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. All right. The next thing I'm going to talk about is search engines. So there's a lot of alternatives, obviously, to search for information other than Google. And Swiss Cows is a really good search engine. It's built-in privacy. It uses AI to determine the context of your inquiry or your query. DuckDuckGo, I use this quite often. It's an excellent privacy search engine. I use this across all of my devices, my iPad, my iPhone. You also have Start Page. So let's say you love Google search results, but you don't want to be tracked. You can use Start Page to use that as your search engine. And then you have Wolfram Alpha. So if you're doing any kind of computational stuff or any kind of problems, this is a computational knowledge engine that computes answers to problems. A lot of students in our math department at Kent State use this, and now at Mason they use this a lot. It's a very good search engine, and it's not just math. It also searches on a variety of subjects, but most of them are science-based. Okay, next I'm going to talk about the OhioLink Consortium. So if you have a library membership and you've actually searched in the library catalog. So let's say I'll give this example. My home is in Cleveland. And so I have a library membership with the Cuyahoga Library. Also, we have Cleveland Public Library, as I mentioned before, and we have Cleveland Heights Library. So if I search in the Cuyahoga County Library catalog and I search for, let's say I'm searching for a book, or if I'm searching for an article, if I can't find that book or I find that article, I then have the option of searching through OhioLink. Another consortium that I did not list here is Search Ohio. So Search Ohio is another consortium. Search Ohio, there's about, I believe there's over 50 or 60 public libraries in the state of Ohio that's a part of that consortium. And that's based on the integrated library system that you use. So for those libraries that use innovative interfaces, and that's the same thing with OhioLink, they usually use use similar ILSs so that those systems can talk to each other. But OhioLink, you can, if it's not in your library catalog, you can search OhioLink for that. It'll see if it's in either a public library or an academic library. So a part of OhioLink Consortium is there's over 118 libraries. 89 of those are institutions of higher learning. So it's both academic, it's public libraries, it's also specialized libraries, and that's statewide throughout the state of Ohio. They also deliver IT services, so they have an infrastructure. So there are some academic libraries, there are some public libraries where they are hosting their systems, or they have a data center down there. So they provide cloud services for a lot of institutions in the state of Ohio. They also assist with content negotiation. So I mentioned a little bit earlier, I talked about the Royal Society of Chemistry. And so as an academic librarian, one of the things that we are responsible for is collection development. So the books that you see in the library when you walk in, whether it's public or academic, in academia, we have different types of librarians. So for example, at George Mason University, the subject area that I am responsible for is the Department of Communication and the Center for Climate Change Communication. So I do collection development for communications. Usually I work with faculty to determine, what research needs they have, what books they're using, what's the most relevant research. And one of the things that I also do is I look for hidden voices. So people of color that are not typically represented in the collection. So I make sure that they know, and that stuff is in our catalog so that they can access that. And so that's how that's done at every academic institution across the world. Academic libraries are responsible for collection development. However, that is predicated on funding. So when we don't have that funding, we rely on another institution to see if they actually have similar content. In some cases, for example, when I worked at Kent State, I talked to people from Akron, or I talked to the same librarian at each institution that had that serviced the same subjects fields that I did, and see what they actually did or did not have, so that I wouldn't order a duplicate. In that way, that sort of expanded the collection. But when I talk about negotiation, when we come up to, we have to negotiate, for the next year or the next 2 years with Elsevier, or with the Royal Society of Chemistry, or with IEEE, or with ACM, to get new subscription prices. In some cases, they go up. Some cases, those institutions will work with you. But OhioLink, in some cases, negotiates on behalf of those libraries, or we'll have a seat at the table, but they'll actually, because the state is actually putting money into that pot also. So they'll try to drive the cost down. And in some cases, when they can't, so in one example, go back to the Royal Society of Chemistry, their prices was a little too high, and that's when we were dealing with a lot of budget constraints. OhioLink decided to cut cords with them. However, our chemistry department was freaking out, so we had to purchase individually journals that they specifically needed. And we also use interlibrary loan. And so that's another service that academic libraries have, and also public libraries where they'll actually get a particular article or a book. They'll give you access, they'll get that access and they'll actually pay for that. So if you think about, if you go to a database or a journal that's behind a paywall, and let's say that article costs $40, they'll pay for the cost of that. And let's say if that's a book or article, whatever, they'll pay the cost of that so that you can have access to that. If it's an electronic copy, you may get access to that for a day, for 2 days, for 30 days. There's all kind of different loan periods. And so based on that, you'll have that loan, you'll get the loan to that particular resource based on what the loan rule is. And that's negotiated through interlibrary loan by the acquisitions department within the library. But OhioLink is one of many consortia across the country. And this is also present in other countries as well. And this is how they are able to drive the cost down. And obviously there are some limitations. If you're in the community, you're not going to have access to let's say IEEE or ACM unless you're actually a member and you have access to the digital library that way. You have to be a student or faculty or staff member of that institution. Okay. So WRLC, this is actually a consortia between George Mason University and Georgetown Catholic University of America, American Public University. See who else? Georgetown, I think I've already said. George Washington is another, but it's all DC and Virginia area libraries, but there's only 10, so it's not every single library in Virginia. But this is an academic consortium, and that's with 10 of us. And so what we do is we create coordinated collections. So like I said before, when I talked about the example, when I contacted, the same subject librarian at Akron and in Ohio State to see what they were collecting, we do the same thing here. So we want to make sure that we're not duplicating the collections. So if we know that, these are the top 5 books on machine learning or AI, instead of each library ordering multiple copies of those, if there's physical copies, obviously we want to make sure there's enough copies available. We'll make sure to, if duplication is needed, then sure. But if it'll save money and 1 copy is enough, then that's fine. And also, we'll decide whether or not to get the digital copy where it's accessible, where it has unlimited seats. So you'll see that, if you use Safari Books Online, so if you're a student or if you've ever been a student or faculty member at an institution, you obviously need, you need to be able to log in and use your credentials to do that. But we create those coordinated collections, and also it creates a robust infrastructure for discovery and access. WRLC does not have the same, doesn't have IT delivery like OhioLink does. One thing that's different between Virginia and Ohio and even DC is they have, in Virginia, each university has its own internal IT department. Is very robust. We see in a lot of states where they sort of downsize and outsource that. In Virginia and DC, they have a big robust IT department. And so all of that stuff is there's, the states don't offer that service because that's all done, in each institution. Also, we share physical and digital information resources, and we also share expertise. So in a lot of cases, one thing that I also found that, WRLC differentiates from OhioLink is we have quarterly meetings where we go to DC or we go to, a place in Virginia, and we all meet and we kind of discuss, the state of the library, whether it's resources, and, upcoming, how is your negotiations going with Elsevier? How are your negotiations going? And, what are you guys collecting? How much of the budget is being cut? So this is stuff that we share with each other, so that when we come back, we can sort of, we know what each other institution is doing, so that we can sort of, move forward to make sure that the collection in general, because we're sharing it, is robust enough that if there are budget cuts, we're still able to get enough resources for researchers. All right, the last thing is OER databases. So probably over the last 10 years, there has been a movement, obviously, because college has been, so expensive, and, ordering books. I remember when I was an undergraduate at Youngstown State University, my first semester, the books were like $800. And so, there was a study I did a research article back in 2014 where I looked at the number of students that dropped out of college, and 80% of those students dropped out because of the cost of books. So that has been a problem for quite some time. And so open educational resources, which OER stands for, has been something that has progressed pretty well over the last 10 years. I can tell you faculty at George Mason University are actually responsible for content creation. So they're actually writing these books. And there are other professors that are writing these books. And there are also actually school teachers that have the background that actually, in public schools that contribute. So anybody can contribute to it. OpenStax is one. You also have MIT has an open courseware, sort of database or repository with those materials. So if you're want to learn, things about psychology or if you think about any particular subject matter, that information is freely available through MIT. You have the open course library, and here you have textbooks, you have syllabi, you have readings, and you have the World Digital Library, where there's a collection of cultural heritage material. So OER, again, has progressed a lot over the years, and this is another really great resource for people in the community. You don't have to be tied to an academic institutions, although academic institutions are actually helping these to stay afloat. So OhioLink has for the Open Textbook Network, what I don't have listed here, which is another really popular OER database. OhioLink has put a lot of resources into that. And so you have some of these consortium that actually supports this, and some libraries, some academic libraries actually pay, to have membership so that these OER databases can be free. And again, that database expands yearly, so more content gets added in actually daily. So there's a lot of stuff that is available, that's freely available to the public that you can use. One other thing also that I want to talk about, again, kind of circle back to the public library and the importance of having a library card. The library also, same process. Librarians do collection development. They also subscribe to databases, right? So some of the databases that you see in academic library are also available in public libraries as well. So you'll have, with that library card, you have access to those databases, also other libraries, resources, and in some cases, some academic resources are also available to you. Also, obviously, the catalog is one of those, but there are some resources that are available to you just by having that. So if you're in Youngstown or if you're in Cleveland, CleveNet, for example, isn't just Cleveland libraries. It's also CleveNet Hubbard Library, which is in Ohio. That's a part of CleveNet. I think Gerard, and you see those consortium is not just local all the time. The example I just gave you with WRLC traverses 2 states, Washington, or excuse me, the DC and of course, Virginia. CleveNet is in Ohio, but it's not within a region, not within a specific region, or not a specific city, but it encompasses, a whole region. So Northeast Ohio libraries are, some of those libraries are a part of CleveNet. And of course, you do have some where it's specific to that particular area or that particular city, or that particular state. So it can either be local, it can be state, it can be regional. And in some cases, like there's a consortium, I believe in California, where they have some international, they have a couple international repositories that they share with the public. So that is the end of my talk. I'm going to open it up for any questions.
Thank you very much, Trevor. That was incredible. I mean, most of the things that you covered, I never heard of.
Can they hear you?
So
Can they hear you?
yeah, they can hear me. Everybody can hear me?
I can hear you fine, thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and start with the questions. We have a number of them. I'm gonna go with the first one that was posted from Joshua Mahoney. He says, so across the different search engines you mentioned, do you have a preference for using when it comes to conducting research when not using a dedicated database?
So for me, privacy is important for me. So for me, I use all kind of devices. So there may be a day where, I'm at my desk and I travel a lot. So sometimes I'll have my iPad. And so I like DuckDuckGo. I use that almost all the time when I'm doing searches, when I'm not using our academic catalog or academic databases. If I'm just using DuckDuckGo, if I'm searching, sometimes I'll search through Google Scholar, which is another resource that you can use as well to find scholarly articles or conference proceedings, conference papers, those things like that. The one thing about Google Scholar is that some of the articles there are not going to be accessible. Those are going to be behind paywalls too. But in some of those cases, when you see that, use that extension that I talked about, and probably 80 to 90% of the time there is a free PDF copy of that. So that's something that some people don't really know about. If you're using Google Scholar and you click on that and like, oh, it's going to Ohio State or it's going to somewhere else, it's a good possibility that there's a free PDF or there's a full text of it that's available, that's freely available. But okay. I love DuckDuckGo.
Okay, thank you, Trevor. Julie just posted a survey. If everyone can just quickly do this poll, it will help us tremendously in upcoming talks. So I'm gonna go ahead and go to the next question for you, Trevor. This is from Elizabeth Williams, and she asked, do other states have databases similar to OhioLink?
Yes, so everybody does. And if you break it down by discipline, if it's computer science, it's typically IEEE ACM. But you see that there's some, and it really is going to depend on, what your that computer science department is doing. So, like if I look at Youngstown State University, and not that I'm going to rag because I'm an alum from there, but they don't have access to IEEE, but they have a strong engineering department, which is kind of puzzling to me. But they don't have access to IEEE. They do have ACM. That's probably ACM is the ACM Digital Library. They are very reasonable. And when we've had budget cuts and had to negotiate with them, they've usually, okay, that's fine. We'll reduce the costs for this year. And then next year, it go back to where it was. But yeah, every state typically has the same databases, but it's really going to be based on whether the institution has the funding. Libraries are allocated money by the provost each year. That's kind of like a budget line item, and each university has a research sort of indicator. So I'm at George Mason University. That's an R1 institution, meaning that it is a heavily research intensive institution. So there's a lot of grants. A lot of the researchers there are well known. So one of the things, in order to have that R1, to have that grade, for lack of a better word, you have to have the resources to back that up. So one of the things that they ask is, what resources that you have. So typically, if you're in engineering, it is expected that you have IEEE or Engineering Village. Those are like the two top ones. And obviously you have other ones that go under that. If you're talking about the physical sciences like chemistry, Royal Society of Chemistry is like, it's the creme, the top of the creme de la creme of all chemistry databases, because all chemistry professors, when you're going through the tenure process, that's actually a part of when they're hired, they have to publish, if they're given they have to publish 6 articles in order to get tenure. All of those have to be in a journal that's specified by the Royal Society of Chemistry. And so that's a good question, but yeah, each academic institution in other states will have access to those same databases. But again, it's going to depend on the funding. It's also going to depend on how strong that department is, that academic department is. And I've seen in some cases where, especially now we've had the Great Resignation. We've lost a lot of staff at Mason, and we're in the process of replacing some of those people. So in some cases, when departments lose librarians and we don't have someone there to speak on their behalf, or be a liaison to them, when it comes down to them, now we're sort of in a negotiating phase. If there's no interim there, then usually what they'll do, if they'll ask the department if it's an important resource, and if it's not, or they'll look at the data usage to see whether or not that database or those resources have been used. In a lot of cases, based on that, if it's low numbers, then they'll cut that, and then they'll say, well, when you do need an article, just contact Interlibrary Loan and we'll get that article for you. But it doesn't make sense for us to pay a $50,000 or $60,000 a year subscription for something that's not necessarily being used often. But yes, it is everywhere, but it's based on those particular factors.
Okay, very good. Now, George Zipperlin asks, how were you able to purchase individual journals without the bundle?
That's a great question, George. And this actually, and this was during, can't remember, during 2015. So we had a budget cut. So this is basically, and I believe this is public knowledge. So this is University of Akron. And I don't know if any of you know what's going on there. They've actually lost 96 people that are actually tenured.
Oh my God.
So the states or the schools in Ohio are going through a lot of budget issues, and that's not new anywhere. So a lot of those journals or those organizations will initially, by default, they have bundles, but you are able to order a journal individually as well. So you can order a journal individually, or you can do it by interlibrary loan, and you can do it per article. So we've had, some situations where, well, in that particular case, the chemistry department was pissed because OhioLink, said, we're not going to pay the price for that because they paid most of the cost. And the universities paid a nice chunk, but OhioLink paid probably 60, 70% of the cost of it. And it just wasn't sustainable. So Royal Society of Chemistry said, well, we don't care if you decide not to re-up. Your universities, your chemistry departments are going to purchase it anyway because they need us. And that's exactly what happened. So the chemistry department, at that time, I was the liaison for chemistry, physics, computer science, all the physical sciences and engineering, mathematics. And so their chair contacted me and I said, yeah, we negotiated, OhioLink dropped it. It's like, we need access to it. And so they actually gave up some of their funds, and the library matched what, and we put a little bit more towards it. But it was a combination. There were two journals that they use a lot. And then there was one journal where we just based it on, whether or not they needed it. Because there were three professors at that time were top 50 chemists in the world. The one that I worked directly with, he was ranked number 20. And he said he looked at that every single day. So usually they have bundles, but in that particular case, they don't want to lose money either. So they'll make it a singular purchase if need be. And in that case, they had to.
Just wanted to take a second and show the results of the survey. Tracy, can you see it or interact with it, or? Hello, Tracy.
I'm sorry.
You told me to share the results.
Okay.
Can you see it and interact with it at all? I'm not too sure what people see on their
So
screen.
what I see is I see the results and it says stop sharing.
Oh, okay. Well,
So I don't
I'm not
wanna
too sure what to show. So
Okay.
yeah.
I see the results.
Okay. Well, I'll give it to you after the thing if you want the details. I didn't.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, so.
Well, I did want to answer one quick question. I was asked a question about the pirate library. So yeah, so if you think about torrenting, where that's illegal, how, in some context. So like if you're downloading, like if you're on Linux and you're downloading ISOs from Linux, you can do it by direct download or you can do it through torrenting software. That's not illegal. But if you go to some of these torrenting sites like the Pirate Bay and you download software, which is illegal, or books where that's copyright infringement. If you're behind a VPN, yeah, they won't be able to track. So that is one way that students have actually, your privacy is there, so long as you're using a VPN that doesn't have a DNS leak, then you're fine. But I, for my own, to what do they call it, COA, I'm going to say it's illegal. Don't do it. But if you do it, you want to make sure that you have some measures to protect yourself. So you could use a VPN. Okay.
Okay, so Julie asked, can you discuss a bit about how we can validate that an article was actually produced by the author? Seems like with digital assets, altering and distributing content is pretty easy to do?
Well, it depends on where you're getting your information from. And when you go through the process of, searching, let's say, and you're a student, correct?
No, I'm not a student right now. I
You're not a
just was
student?
asking in general, like
Oh.
there's all these sites, some of them are community based, some of them are like, obviously the illegal sites you have to worry about even more because there's nobody there curating it. But like, how do we know, like when we go to some of these places, that we're actually getting what the author intended for us to receive?
So one thing you want to do is you want to do research on the author. So if, let's say I find an article and you have the author's name, if it's not, if I'm not searching in IEEE where that's been vetted, it's been through the peer review process, or ACM where that's been vetted, it's been through the peer review process, I'm looking in an open access journal, that's still going to go through, you want to also look at the journal to see what their peer review process is. Usually that's a double blind review if it has that, the frequency as in terms of how often it's published. But I often always look to see what other articles that individual has written before I actually choose to cite their work. That's an important part. It can be tedious, and this is probably one of the other questions that students have asked me as well. You have to do your due diligence to find out whether the author who produced that content is who they say they are, but also the content itself. So there's usually a list of references. I would do some citation mining to see exactly what articles that they've cited, and usually you can tell then whether or not the article is legit or not, and then the content matter. So if someone is doing research on something that you never heard before, that's very rare, considering that there are, hundreds of millions of articles across all, and I'm talking about vetted databases. There's enough information that's out there where you can vet. You also have ORCID ID. So most researchers, not all researchers, have ORCID ID. That basically that's a one way that you can differentiate. Especially, let's say there's probably 5 or 6 Trevor Watkinses, and I've published articles. And so I have my ORCID ID tied to my name. So if anyone clicks on me, you go to my ORCID ID, you can go to my ResearchGate page, you can see stuff I've written, people who I've collaborated with. I think that's really important. So one thing you have to do is you have to do stuff on your end, which is a part of the research process, to determine whether or not the people that you are citing or the stuff that you're reading is actually legit, because there are predatory journals that are out there, and there are people that are still publishing in those, and those are actually considered open access, and they are. And so that was one of the reasons when I talked about Bill's list, why a lot of people were upset that they got rid of it, but it became a very political thing in the end, and so they ended up having to take that down. Okay. But if you're using open access, the director of open access journals is the actual. If you want to find legit journals, you want to go there because that has actually been vetted. In addition to that, if you're looking, if you're looking behind the paywall, so like Elsevier, and I talked about green access and gold access. Some of the articles that's in Elsevier actually points to one of the journals, to some of the journals in DOAJ. And actually a lot of those do. So the DOAJ, I would say, look there and definitely do your homework on the researcher that, you may consider citing or reading their work.
Yeah. So we're not like, there's no place to go. Like, obviously you get the peer reviewed places and paid for sources that you're counting on their trust, but there's like let's just say that I grab an article by you, Trevor, and I download it. I can't like grab a hash of it and go check it somewhere and say like, I got the article that Trevor intended me to read. Do you see what I'm saying?
Not that I know of. If that if that existed, that would be
But you
a
see what I'm
great
saying, especially
resource.
with like lots of AI and
That's
artificial generated content. Like I could download something, but it may not be.
yeah.
You might have your name on it, and it might be your topic, but that may not be the conclusion you came to in that paper.
That's called an NFT, Julie.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, you know, Trevor, I have a kind of like a two-part question here. It's about search interface, the search interfaces. So this is across all the kind of searches you talked about. Could you characterize the flexibility for advanced search? So I'm not interested in keyword, just simple keyword search, but I want to do full Boolean searches or more precise searching. Could you characterize those repositories, in your experience, the flexibility of those search interfaces? That's kind of like part one of that question. Part two of that question is, do any of those interfaces support machine access? Like, do I have to search it as a person, or can I put it in, search it as a computer? Can I, have my computer do the search? So that's one kind of question, like a two-part question. And my second question is, are you aware, or can you point us to repositories that are meant just for machine searching and not for human searching?
Okay, so I think you had a third one. So I think the first one you mentioned, you asked about advanced searches. So
yeah, advanced searches, yeah.
So you talk about, Boolean searches, or if you're using truncation, those sort of things. A lot of the search engines have that built in, or you can use that using parentheses or quotation or double quotations if you want to use a whole phrase rather than using a keyword. And you have some where you can actually refine your search, refine your results. So let's say you put in a Boolean search, or you're searching for this phrase, or you're searching for this and this, not this or this. You get your search results back. You can then refine your search results by date. So if you want the most common research over the last 5 years or the last 3 years. So if you think about COVID, that's people want the from the last 2 years. Obviously, it's not going to go any. Well, no, if you look at some of the different variations of COVID, but you can also determine whether or not you want scholarly articles, or if it's coming directly from whatever particular kind of news or media. So if it's coming from if it's a scholarly article or a conference proceeding, you can refine by that. You can also refine by geographic location. So let's say you're doing research, but you want to see what's going on in the UK, or if you want to see what's going on in South Korea, provided that that article, in that article, they're talking specifically about that. And usually that's going to be in the abstract, and that's indexed. That is, those are other ways in the interface that you can sort of do advanced searches to find what you need. And to the answer to your second question, when you're saying have the machine do it for you, do you mean by you writing some kind of an application?
Yeah, writing an app or a script, so do those repositories tend to allow you to have a machine-to-machine API? You know what I mean? As opposed to a person sitting there and typing the query.
So I know OhioLink, they have APIs available. So if you have the wherewithal to develop that software, you could do it. A lot of these consortiums, especially when they had, and same thing I believe with the World Catalog, they have APIs, they have those APIs available. So I don't personally know of any software that's out there that does that, but it's possible. If because those APIs are available, it's possible for you actually to build that software to do that. But I personally don't know.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to know. Where those APIs public, I guess, is
yeah, those APIs are public.
Okay, so we could do it. And then and then like the second question, this was it. You mentioned a lot of repositories that obviously are meant for human search. How do I find repositories that are meant for machine search? You know what I mean? Like in web services, you have that web service directory, the web service directory services where you can look up machine to machine type stuff. Are you aware of library type or academic type of repositories that really are designed to allow people to do API searches?
No, we don't have any. I know we don't have any at Mason, and I'm not. I have to be honest. I don't know specifically of any. I don't know of any specifically, but I will look that up, and I will inquire about that, and I can give you that answer afterwards.
Oh, cool, thanks.
Okay, we're running out of time, so I'm going to skip to this very important question. I believe this is from Bob Paddock. Why are publicly funded with our tax dollars studies behind paywalls?
That's a good question, Bob. And that's one of the arguments that we were trying to make, during that whole issue with Royal Society of Chemistry, because what libraries have actually done. And, I don't necessarily agree with it. I think it should be open to everybody, right? Because like you said, you pay taxes. Some of that tax dollars is going to Youngstown State University or Ohio State. So I should be able to walk in and, do whatever searches I have to do. But because students are paying, so it's kind of like they're doing it sort of like a pricing tier. Because you're a student and you're paying a certain, you're paying tuition, we're going to give you access to this. We know you're a taxpayer, you have some. So what they have done is, let's say you, Bob, you don't have access to IEEE, you want access to IEEE. You can schedule a meeting. You can, I don't know if YSU does this. I'm assuming that they do. But at George Mason University and all of the universities that's in our consortium, you can schedule a day to come in and you have a guest pass for that entire day or a certain number of hours where you have access to our computers, our lab, and you can do or conduct whatever research you need. It's just not, you don't have, open all access. Now you can come to the library. You can hop on our Wi-Fi for free. But in a lot of cases, actually, they've also shut that off too, because now they're using two-factor authentication, which they didn't before. So you could before come in, and if you had your, as long as you're on the Wi-Fi, you could access all of that stuff for free. So there were some people in the community that were doing that. But because they entered in, and Duo is the application that they're using, since they instituted 2FA, now you have to get a guest pass. So we'll have high schools that'll come to George Mason, and they'll schedule that. And in some cases, if they're working on a project and if they need to come up there multiple times, then we kind of just customize their access based on, what they need. Or for researchers there, if it's a postdoc, or if it's somebody in the community that's just doing some work, they're doing a book, or, we don't necessarily ask them for that information. But if they need access, they'll just say, I need access to these things, or I just need full access to the library, and they'll have a guest pass for however long that they need it. But yeah, you can't just come up into the library and hop on a computer. that's one you have to actually go through that process to do it. I agree. I mean, I think that you should be able to, I should be able to go in and do research because we're paying, because it's a public university and they're using public tax dollars, but that's kind of where we are, and I don't agree with it, but that's one way that libraries do that. So usually when I go out of town, if I go to a conference and there's a university nearby, I'll contact them and say, hey, I want to come into the library, and it's a pretty easy process. You come in, they give you a guest pass and your temporary login for that day or whatever timestamp, and you have access to everything.
Well, we're at 7:30 and I still have a couple of questions left. I don't know if Julie wants to continue or you want to continue, or I could email you these questions and email the answers to those that posed it, but it's like a good 4 questions.
Yeah, you can send those to me, and if you have their emails, I'll send them a response, and I'll also send that response to Cam, and you can share that with everybody too about your question about machine-to-machine searching.
Yeah.
Okay, so at this point, I had a question. I think it would be a benefit for everybody. Is it some way that you can give us the list of resources that you mentioned in your talk? And if you have some kind of synopsis as far as what they're used for, then we can also send that out to everyone.
Yeah, I can do better than that. I can actually give you all of those, so I just touched on a few things, but I can give you a whole list of OER, MOOCs, repositories that's available, and even the subject areas that's covered. Yeah, I can put together a list and I can give that to you.
Okay, and I'll email it out, and it'll be okay if we post it on our web page. That would be okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Except for the pirate library stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't put my name next to that.
Okay. We will not. But that was an excellent talk, and we're still
very
getting
good. Yeah, excellent.
We're still getting questions in here. But we're going to have to end it. And I really appreciate you doing this presentation. I think this is something that every single university student should have a presentation like this at this quality at every single university. This sounds like just basic information, access, understanding the resources, how to use it, what to use. This should be just a part of that orientation for every single student. And I think the universities should be advocating for that. That should be just a part of their orientation. So just an excellent job.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Give me applause here.
And everyone, we will be taking this video. We will be posting it on our YouTube channel, and we will send this information out to everyone along with these resources that Trevor is referring to. And we really appreciate everyone for joining. This is a really excellent, useful talk. Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Everyone for coming and participating, and the questions were fantastic. And we're going to get these answers to Bob Paddock and James Dietrich and Lael, and Julie had another question, and Dipesh had a question. So we're definitely going to get these answers to you. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Thank you very much.